Continuing once again in the First Global Revolution, we're in Chapter 8, and this is the second video in that chapter. And I left off in a list of, it said, we mentioned a few of the factors operating on both the national and international levels, so I pick up with that list. The enormous volume of information, the speed of communication, and the importance of the media as amplifier, selector, filter, and distorter of what passes as information, despite the fact that in the South, access to information is still very limited. The emergence of a new world technical system based on microelectronics. The appearance of problems demanding management on a global scale of mankind's common heritage in areas such as climate, environment, the exploitation of the oceans, and architectural heritage. The simultaneous consequences of technical development and the fragmentation of political power on the security of national societies. The dilemma of swollen bureaucracies, the nature and diversity of the problem to be solved, and the systems, health, welfare, etc., to be managed, encourage the growth of large bureaucracies, which considerably increase resistance to change. In some national societies, changing individual attitudes have led to increasing demands for services from the government. Citizens find it hard to believe that governments are unable to find solutions which will not cause them hardship or inconvenience. Simultaneously, there is a decline in respect for authority and a lessening trust in and support for institutions. Although far from exhaustive, this list suggests that most of these factors will be felt with increasing intensity in the 20 to 30 years to come. These new dimensions of governance place humankind in front of an entirely new historical situation. We must therefore not be surprised by the inadequacy of many of the answers currently given to the contemporary problems. The inadequacy of the response to current problems. It is necessary to stress once more that the existence of tragic situations such as military conflict, threats to peace, violence of human rights, environmental damage, and the intolerable persistence of widespread poverty and hunger in the world demonstrate the malfunction of the world system. Demographic, economic, political, and environmental trends of global dimension have combined in recent years to create a qualitatively distinct category of practical problems that were virtually unknown to traditional diplomacy. They are beyond the reach of individual national governments, cannot be fitted into accepted theories of competitive interstate behavior, and are coming increasingly to dominate world affairs. They cannot be wished away, and they are indifferent to military intervention. Inadequacies in the functioning of the system concern above all national governments and the intergovernmental international agencies. However, they also involve a wide range of other actors, individuals, political parties, firms, trade unions, educational systems, NGOs, and so on. And the role they play are not yet allowed to play in the operation of the world system. The following are a few of the more obvious inadequacies displayed by national governments and intergovernmental bodies. While for some countries the principle of sovereignty is the only basis for cohesion and national identity, it is increasingly incompatible with the realities of interdependence. Governments give priority to politically useful short-term solutions and systematically neglect the longer-term perspective. As a consequence of such legacies of neglect, problems tend to become compounded and governments fall into a rhythm of crisis government. Governments are organized mainly in the form of sectoral ministries, identify sectoral options, treat symptoms in isolation, and propose static and local solutions. They are thus incapable, as now organized, to identify the problematique and apply the résolutique. In the allocation of resources between the many sectoral claimants, and in many countries, ministers with strong political power or strong personality find it easier to obtain credits than their weaker colleagues, thus creating imbalances. central governments respond to challenges by attempting to increase their control over other agents, thus generating random negative effects while generating demand for decentralization. When leaders make decisions on a situation of uncertainty, they suffer not only from their inadequacies as human beings, but also from handicaps inherent to their role, such as overwork, insufficient time for reflection, manipulated information, biased presentation of proposed decisions from lower positions in the hierarchy, and often too great a reliance on subordinates. As for intergovernmental agencies, the system established immediately after the Second World War was rapidly designed to meet world needs as seen at the time. Henceforth it grew like Topsy, untidy and unplanned, with additions to meet new needs as they were identified. Little thought was given to the interactions and overlaps of the confusing mass of specialized units, as was inevitable. Many of the agencies gradually began to cultivate their vested interests. Staff was recruited less on quality than on assuring, through quotas and equitable distribution of posts to each member country. At the same time, the effectiveness of some of the main agencies was diminished by over-bureaucratization and politicization. Attack on the complexity of the contemporary problems entails a double risk, that of excluding public opinion and elected representatives from the knowledge necessary for the understanding of the situation, as well as that of strengthening the influence of specialists and experts whose arcane knowledge is difficult for the decision makers to appraise and check. The complexity of the problems has been compounded by the number and complexity of the actors, political parties, trade unions, corporations, non-governmental organizations, as well as pressure groups of all kinds, including informal groups, which may be short-lived and nevertheless intense and effective in their mobilization on a particular issue. These various groups contribute to governance through their proposals and protests. And the rest he put in italics. Governance is no longer the monopoly of governments and intergovernmental bodies, and its effectiveness will depend on the capacity of leader makers to selectively include in their decision making these new actors, which are in fact their partners in governance. The structures, policies, and procedures of governments. Increasing obsolescence is thus a major characteristic of governance today. Its structures were in the essentials designed more than a century ago to meet the needs of much simpler societies than the present. Certainly some important innovations have taken place in the meantime, such as the emergence of universal suffrage, the evolution of the welfare state, and a recognition of human rights. But by and large, change has been incremental, or by extension of the already existing, it has been accompanied by high costs, swollen bureaucracies, and inefficiency as the range of governmental intervention increased. Here we shall mention only a few of the areas where major innovations in structures and attitudes are most urgently required, and we'll pick up in the next video.